Time to get across to the Spa-Francorchamps circuit then, nestling in the Ardennes forest. It's the longest circuit on the Formula One calendar, which means even Watty should have time to say everything he wants to. Ben Edwards is first up though, and Ben, in many ways, this track is a throwback to a golden age.
Well, that's true, Matt. Yes, it is a beautiful circuit, of course. It's changed over the years from when it first started out. It was even longer, even greater track than it is now. It was some 8 to 9 miles long. It was one of the most dangerous circuits there was in Formula One, and quite a few racing drivers, I'm afraid, lost their lives here at Spa over the years. A great pre-war British racing driver, Richard Seaman, was killed, and several drivers killed post-war as well. These days the track is much safer. It's been modified a great deal, of course, and as we've heard from the drivers, those constant modifications, the bus stop, the Eau Rouge sections of the track, have changed the nature of the place a little bit. But it's still great fun, and we're looking forward to a tremendous Grand Prix here this afternoon. John, I have to say that the danger of losing this Belgian Grand Prix to Spa is a real danger. You mentioned it earlier on, not only the tobacco advertising, but the whole nature of the track and the environs and the set-up space for the teams as well.
Well, Ron Dennis was talking, and some of the comments he made indicated that he thinks that the circuit needs to make huge strides forward because Formula One is growing constantly. The working areas the teams have to deal with is substandard. We see in the pit lane that Toyota at the very end of the pit lane can barely get out of their garage and make it round a very tight turn onto the pit lane exit. So it is a problem, the circuit. It's the location of the pits. These pits were initially built for the 83 Belgian Grand Prix, replacing the ones that are on the downhill run from La Source Hairpin Bend down into the Eau Rouge corner. They're still used for various other events, 24-hour races that take place here. In fact, they use both pits for that event, so large as the entry. But here you see really a pit lane that in 83 probably very acceptable, 2002 looking forward to 2003 inadequate.
Well, we're just 30 seconds or so away from the start of this morning's warm-up. It's a half-hour session, just to remind you. Absolutely glorious conditions. We had fog on Friday, which delayed the start of the free practice session, but it could not be more different now. It's gorgeous down there. Absolutely stunning day in the Ardennes forest in this eastern region of Belgium. Close to the German border, remember, so fans pouring over the border from Germany to support their man Michael Schumacher here today. Starting from pole position, there is the green light then, and the warm-up session gets underway, and we'll see all the cars coming out. Fresh engines, of course, in all of these cars, been replaced overnight for their race engines, rebuilt gearboxes, rebuilt suspension components. The boys have been working hard, and it's time to do the installation lap now to make sure that everything's been bolted together correctly.
Yes, a lot of work takes place, and engines in, engines out, and they'll go out and do the regular one lap in, check the car, watch to see what Williams do, because the BMW are very, very strict on engine mileage. And this is a high-speed circuit. Engines do get a fair amount of full throttle operation, one of the highest of all Grand Prix. So it may be that Williams do not run, particularly in the case of Montoya, we've seen in the past. He's not done very many laps. He's gone out literally in the first. The circuit open, then comes back in and waits there, and then goes back out 10 minutes to go. Another factor is that about 50% of the Michelin teams went with the softer tyre, the other 50% with the harder tyre. And Bridgestone, I think it's probably a little bit less. They've chosen a tyre that's going to help them in terms of the strategy as we watch Montoya crawl up through the Radion, up this long, long straight, fastest part of the circuit. We saw high speeds there yesterday, top of which was 332 kilometers per hour from Rubens Barrichello, and that's pretty impressive.
It is very impressive. It's about 207 miles per hour, so well over the 200 mile an hour mark. And in fact, looking at the speed trap figures, Michael Schumacher actually had over 200 miles an hour also at the top of Radion, I noticed, right at the top of Radion, the speed trap there, and he had 321.2 kilometers per hour, so that is the 200 mile an hour mark.
Yeah, and he only got another 10 kilometers per hour towards the end of the straight before they break into Lecumbe, so cars attaining virtual maximum speed very early in that long straight.
So we've got ideal conditions for this morning's warm-up. Cool temperatures, of course, at this early hour. It's 9:30 Spa time, and it still means that the weather conditions mean it's quite cool. You've seen people walking around in jackets despite the bright sunshine, and that temperature will change considerably as we go through the day. There are some intermediate tyres on the Ferrari of Michael Schumacher. Just as he completes this installation lap, there's no point in scrubbing the dry weather tyres. Keep them safe for later on today.
And of course, part of that keeping them safe is there's always the danger that if some debris, maybe rocks, gravel, get thrown off the track, or even bits of bodywork from some of the support races have not been cleared away in total. You slice a tyre, that reduces your set of 7 sets available down to 6, and that then is also an immediate handicap.
Formula 3000 race was held yesterday afternoon. Just to quickly update you on that, Giorgio Pantano took the victory in the Coloni run car. Thomas Enger and Sebastian Bourdais had a little bit of contact into the first corner. Bourdais still finished second, Enger finished fourth, and that means in the 3000 championship there's just 1 point between the top two in the series. They have just one more round to go. That will be at Monza to support the Italian Grand Prix. And it's still Frenchman Bourdais with 1 point advantage over the Czech Thomas Enger, and the Italian Giorgio Pantano still in with a shout if the other two were to take each other off, for example, and Pantano came through to win. So still lots to play for in the category that the idea is to feed drivers into Formula One. Of course, it didn't work last year quite with Justin Wilson, but there's still been a lot of talk about that.
Well, Justin, somebody who I feel by right on merit should be a Formula One driver, but sadly his 6'3" frame is just too large. It was too large for Jordan. They gave him a test at the back end of last year. Likewise, Minardi, they tried to squeeze him in, but it's a bit like the Ugly Sisters in Cinderella. You know, how hard you try, it ain't going to happen. So on Minardi, and they've said they are prepared to build a larger chassis. Of course, it's all conditional on having enough sponsorship to make this all happen. Nevertheless, Justin Wilson would be a driver I think would be a great credit to the Minardi team if that's what they chose to do, and certainly I think has got the ability and the potential to be a strong runner in a Grand Prix career.
So cars just getting their first checks here. Michael Schumacher completing his installation lap. He's the only car on circuit at the moment because everyone else went out as the pit lane opened. Michael prepared to just sit and wait a moment before making his way around, getting some good clear track. He did this yesterday in qualifying as well, actually, on his first flying run when he put in the first demon lap. Only took 2 flying laps to take pole yesterday.
Yes, and he's on those intermediate tyres, so literally you can see the speed. It's like just a crawl around the circuit just to ensure that all the functions of that engine change and the car rebuild that took place last night are okay, and he drives back into the pit lane. So we look at Rubens Barrichello. He's on a full set of wets, and Barrichello has done a lap, but he's now doing another lap. So of course he has the spare car this weekend. Michael has got his race car, so Rubens has got the dedicated spare car. That is the actual Rubens race car, and Kimi Raikkonen likewise has got use of the spare car being pulled out.
Using the jack to pull him out, John. I think that they had problems earlier this weekend, didn't they?
Fearing that,
yeah.
Yes, this is part of the problem. That's what Ron Dennis is, I think, in part referring to. That is not acceptable today at a Grand Prix circuit. You've got to use a jack to take your car out of the garage. Here's Kimi now on a lap. Great job. I mean, outstanding piece of qualifying we saw from the young Finn yesterday. In fact, still 22-23 in about a month and a half's time. And the only thing that I think you might say, and so maybe something critical about McLaren, was they still had a number of niggling problems throughout the practice and qualifying sessions, and that is a slight worry for the team, because to challenge Ferrari they need a car that is utterly bulletproof. There's no weaknesses anywhere in the Ferrari, so we need to see McLaren just finalise all those details in the car to give Kimi Raikkonen an opportunity to go eyeball to eyeball, as we saw him do in France with Michael Schumacher. And here on the Spa-Francorchamps circuit, it could easily be a battle of tyre companies as much as it is of the teams.
That's right. Of course, yesterday we saw that amazing moment where he went through the smoke that had been emitted by Olivier Panis's blown Honda engine. I noticed afterwards that he said he'd actually picked up where the oil line was and made sure he went to the opposite side.
Yes, I was talking to some friends last night who are very close to Formula One, and we discussed this issue. And I said in the commentary it was extremely courageous or brave, and the response was, no, it was totally stupid. Because if you do not know what is in that cloud, then by doing what he did, one might argue it was completely irresponsible and stupid. Now, I countered by saying, well, of course, the team can watch this on television. They know that that was a blow-up, and Panis was safely off to the right of the circuit. It wasn't a problem. But nevertheless, when you go into those situations, you know, it is, as much as Kimi may have known that there wasn't any issue, it's still, at that kind of speed, the best part of 200 miles an hour, well, it's a shot and a call that you have to make, and you live or whatever by the consequences.
Well, the fans are here in good spirits this morning. Ideally too, with the weather conditions that we're seeing. It can be so variable here. Sometimes it can be clouded in mist and rain at this time of the morning, but it is glorious. Jarno Trulli making his way around. Good effort yesterday from him as well. He's lining up 7th on the grid for this afternoon's Grand Prix.
Yes, a good run from Renault on a circuit where they had hoped to be competitive, and I think that hope has been materialised. So a good qualifying for Jarno Trulli. Again, having listened to Flavio Briatore say that we know that Jarno is a naturally very fast driver. What we have to do is now start to educate him into being a good Grand Prix driver, and the two things are not necessarily the same. Jenson Button a little bit further down in 10th place. Difference in time about half a second between the two Renault drivers. Jenson not as happy with his qualifying runs as he would have sought to be either just ahead of Trulli or at worst just behind him.
So the work continuing down there in the Ferrari garage, and of course being Spa, we said how beautiful it is this morning and how quickly the weather conditions can change. Ferrari, as all the other teams, will be keeping a close eye on the weather patterns, have their own weather forecast, and Peter, I know that you've been looking into that side of things a little bit.
Have indeed, Ben. Yes, it's a pointless exercise asking any of the highly paid team weather forecasters what's going to happen today, because they're obviously paid not to talk as well, because that information is very exclusive to the team for which they work. But there is this potential for rain today, and I thought it was quite interesting there to see both Ferraris out with their flashing red rain lights on, which signify also the use of wet weather traction control settings and so forth. And on that installation lap, it looked to me as if they were just checking through all the wet weather functions of the car as well. So maybe Ferrari, we can read into that, maybe Ferrari's forecaster is saying great potential for rain this afternoon.
Right, well, we'll have to keep a close eye on conditions. Of course, Ferrari are amazing in the way that they prepare for just about every eventuality, whether it's expected or not, and you see that in their pit stop practice. They prepare for just about everything, even forgetting to put the wheels out and putting the wrong fuel hose on. So maybe just part of Ferrari's intense preparation. We're riding here with Anthony Davidson. Spoke to him, didn't we, just a few moments ago, and he'll be starting his 2nd Grand Prix here today. That's all for the but still working hard on a deal for next year.
Yes, very much wants to be a Grand Prix driver, having spent a year, and again just gets it slightly wrong in Eau Rouge. The car under braking, the back stepped out, and of course he had to correct it and missed the apex. Also watching him going through the bus stop chicane, a slightly softer entry than we've seen from others on the onboard shot, indicating that maybe he's not quite comfortable enough with the car to go up and make it a slightly more acute turn in. There's that oil slick we were talking about from Olivier Panis. You could see where he laid that oil down on Saturday qualifying session, and the residue of it still on track.
Up towards Lecoum, and the right left, and through the quick right-hander at Malmedy. And that was a good first split time from Davidson. It's actually fastest, well, it was fastest for a moment. Montoya's just gone a little bit quicker, but of course, it's early stages of the warm-up. Really, people are just putting in their first flying laps here. Heading down the hill, down towards Puon, the double left-hander. This was where Raikkonen was so impressive yesterday and put a wheel over the edge at one point. Davidson taking a neat and tidy line. Of course, he's having to sort of relearn the car a little bit this morning, because with a heavy fuel load, it feels quite different, and your braking points change considerably.
Yes, again, watching coming through the series of corners, the Fagna and running down into Stablo, just to watch the way Anthony he feels the car into the corner. He's not coming up and being aggressive on the entry there in the second part of Stablo. Slightly more difficult to commit to a full throttle exit of the corner now. Climbs up through this series of left-handers coming into the flat out, or what ordinarily we would expect to be flat out Blanchimont. Well, sounds pretty flat. And all the way now, watch this entry, slightly softer the way he enters than you've seen other drivers come up and make that a more acute entry.
Interesting looking at the revs too. We know this Asia Tech engine, as Peter was telling us, perhaps a slightly safer spec. He goes fastest, but the revs, nothing like as high as we see from some of the top running teams, where they're over 18,000 revs regularly around the track and between gear changes. So Michael Schumacher now heading out. He is on some dry weather tyres now. Yes,
he's in his car. Of course, the spare car, as we mentioned, is dedicated to Barrichello for the rest of the season. If Michael needs it, of course, it will be transferred to his settings and his particular needs. But Rubens Barrichello has been given the car as a reward for all the good work he did for Ferrari and for helping Michael Schumacher win his 5th world title. Right now, We're seeing purples pop up all over the timing screen. That's button 5 on your handset. Purple, of course, indicates fastest sector time. And the fastest sector time in Sector 1 is Kimi Räikkönen. There's a surprise. In Sector 2, it's Alan McNish, the Toyota. And so far, we haven't got a purple up in Sector 3, but no doubt we will very shortly.
Great view on board there with Jenson Button as he headed up through Eau Rouge.
And then the advertising that was on the circuit, we saw that first of all in Hungary, we saw it here on the exit of Eau Rouge. That has been removed at the request of the drivers. They were unhappy with it, particularly at the prospect of rain falling. They thought that would be an unnecessary hazard to the drivers, and that has been removed.
Yes, there was some writing up on the track above Radillon, beyond Eau Rouge, on the straight up towards Les Combes. But that has been removed. Michael Schumacher in particular wasn't particularly happy about it, so something has been done. De La Rosa currently fastest, but not for long, because there goes Kimi Räikkönen. He now is fastest overall, a 1 minute 50.192. So we're about 6.5 seconds away from qualifying pace yesterday.
So Jenson Button through Fagnes.
Beautiful pictures this morning in these clear conditions. Just look at that sky. Just a few light clouds around, but nothing much to worry about at this stage. Of course, it might change considerably by the start of the Grand Prix.
Well, no hint of a lift there from Button, but you can see again all the marks on the racetrack, how these cars with fuel on board, and that's a problem. Oh, Sato, and he's gone off on the exit of, there's a Stavolo corner. It's the corner that leads you back on the hill, and you get it wrong there, that's the consequence.
Yeah, okay, tack. Okay, got you.
And that's an unfortunate start to the day for Takuma Sato. He'll be disappointed. Qualified down in 16th place. Hasn't been a very good weekend so far for Jordan.
It's Dom. Do you want to try and get him in the T car? No.
Yeah, that's he was on his 5th lap, so it wasn't exactly a first flying lap. But nevertheless, let's watch and see. Oh, well, there's the reason he gets completely wide, far too early in the exit of the corner. And I mean, he was quite lucky that the car had a complete 360-degree spin, but maybe unfortunate that it didn't put a point itself back onto the racetrack. He could have almost gotten away with that one, but just there we go, just caught you see the left front pulled back. Doesn't look like it's done too much damage. There's no heavy impact in the turbine. Well, EJ looks towards the direction of Stavolo, but well, not giving too much away on the weekend, when Eddie has been probably quieter than at any point, I think, in his 10-year Formula 1 career.
Well, that's tough for the Jordan team. They're going to have some work to do now in preparation for the Grand Prix itself, but as you said, Johnny, it's a bit unfortunate. He might well have been able to get away with that. So Michael Schumacher now heading his way around again. He's up on the times, although he slowed right down there because of the safety car being out. He's going past Takuma Sato. And therefore Schumacher's time will not really be representative at this point. Just looking down the list at the moment, the two McLarens, 1 and 2, Button 3rd, then Barrichello 4th, then it's Montoya. De La Rosa's been pushed down to 6th place at the moment. We're about halfway through this session.
So Michael Schumacher comes across the line and probably will know he did back off. He was actually quickest in that second sector. That was just before the incident with Takuma Sato, and he did the right thing. He backed off. He could have potentially been quickest, but he did what he was required by regulations, and consequently his 12th quickest doesn't really matter because the speed is there and Michael knows it, and he was playing the game the correct manner. Rubens hopping from spare to race car back into, so that car sitting up on the jacks and no wheels or tyres on it. They may want to take the set of tyres that is on the car he's just come in and put, but I can't imagine why. So Rubens losing a little bit more time, and sometimes the benefit of having a spare car becomes, look at what are these idiots doing.
That looked painful, didn't it?
Well, that was completely dumb. Now, Eddie Jordan would be fully entitled to say, you can pay for all the damage to that car, because that left front wasn't damaged before the incident, but look what you've just done to my car.
I don't think even Eddie would get away with that one. Right,
I'd say he wouldn't try.
On board with Michael here. Had to back off last time around, but they have cleared the incident. Yellow's flags have been withdrawn, and he's coming down through that section now. Just before that area, he comes down to Stavolo now, and he doesn't have to worry about slowing down. carrying the speed through there, using a bit of curb. This is where Sato went off, and he gets through there cleanly. Actually, Schumacher himself ran off track here in the Grand Prix last year, but got away with it.
1.3 seconds up on David Coulthard's time. David currently second quickest. That was a sector time, of course. Kimi Räikkönen is still quickest overall, 150.192. But Michael now with purples in first and second sector. And again, just look how easy it is for the world champion. Sits there, just takes the line he wants, doesn't deviate, no hand movement. Well, 148.4. Remember this, Ferrari is on the softer of the two Bridgestone tyres, whereas Rubens Barrichello is on the harder of the two.
Take another look at what happened to Takuma Sato. Drifted too wide through the first Stavolo, and then just lost control over the curbs and grass, and was unlucky really then just to clip the tyre barrier on the outside.
Just as he came back to that tarmac, it took a bit of a bite and turned left, and it could have so easily just gone straight down the grass and get away with it. But there's where the problem began. He was too wide too early in the exit of the second part of Stavolo, spins across the painted part of the track. At this point, then it just takes a bite, and he then gets trapped on the grass. It's a bit of a slope into that tyre barrier, and he's just drawn into it, and left front torn off. So Takuma Sato, a little bit of egg on face.
Yeah, well, that was the initial problem, and then let's take a look at what happened. They were pulling the car back over to the gap, and they all got it a bit wrong, and this poor Marshall who was trying to steer it with one wheel flicked straight off the car.
I mean, we are in Belgium, it is Sunday, and the only thing missing are the chips and mayonnaise.
Well, Montoya's out there now. Williams no doubt running plenty of fuel on the cars as we prepare. But just a quick note, that lap that Michael Schumacher did just now, 148.418, actually over a second faster than the lap record from last year. I know we've made changes to the track and things, so we're expecting faster times, but just as an indicator, it's a second faster than he managed when he set the lap record here last year.
Well, I think it's an indication just of how much work, and we saw something like 5 seconds in qualifying year on year, or overall qualifying time, so clearly the track has picked up speed, and that surfacing is a great deal of it. The difference in the difference in the bus stop chicane is probably very minimal in reality. It's easier for the drivers, it's not as aggressive on the car, but in terms of actual time, it's very difficult to say it's significant.
Montoya doesn't look too happy, does he? A little shake of the head there. Not quite sure what he's feeling about that. Obviously switching from spare car to race car, no urgency, not the jauntiness in his step that we saw from Barrichello.
And I suspect Juan Pablo doesn't actually enjoy jumping from car to car, which is what you're required to do on Sunday morning if you want to have access to the T car. It's nice to have one car and stick with it through the 30-minute session. You're on a circuit like this, you don't get that many laps for your 30 minutes, and therefore to sort of jump in out, and of course you've got to do an out lap, a time lap, and then an in lap for one single run, and that's 3 laps, and you're probably in a half hour going to get maybe at best 12 laps, so splitting that between 2 cars doesn't give you much continuity of running.
The Sauber's desperately trying to find, and Massa's saying he's got a flat tyre, so
well, that's what he feels. It may not be a
like
flat,
it, yeah.
That's the feeling he has, but it may be something else. So when we looked at the tyres briefly, we're not close enough to get a good look. He seemed to be pointing to the right front, indicating he thought he had a problem there. And drivers very often second guess problems in cars. It's an intuitive reaction, and sometimes they are right, other times they're wrong. It's another problem, but you have to look around the car. Certainly the tyre engineers will check that right front and see whether there is a problem. First thing to do is put the pressure gauge on and see what the tyre pressure is.
Fisichella had to qualify the spare car yesterday after going off in his race car, but still managed to set a slightly better time in the T car, but it's still only enough, I'm afraid, for 14th on the grid.
Yeah, Ben, just watching Fisichella coming through Stavolo, the first part, the back end of the car looked a little bit loose to me, and maybe that's what caught out Takuma Sato. Sato was actually on an improving lap at the point when he went off, and maybe just got caught by the back end of the car, and it's always been a slight inherent design, or call it a flaw, if you like, of the Jordans, and they've had this rear end instability. When they get the car balanced, it's pretty reasonable, but if they haven't quite got that balance, the back end is sometimes a bit wayward, and that may just have been what caught out Sato.
Riding on board, Jarno Trulli looked like he had a bit of understeer through the right-hander at Rivage, had to sort of wait a little bit. before getting on the throttle.
Yeah, I think in Rivage you see the difference between the two tyre companies. The Michelin tyre doesn't really give you the opportunity to get the kind of bite that we've seen, particularly from Ferrari, where the Ferrari can really hold a tight line around Rivage.
So there again, of course, been quite a big gap between Ferrari and the other Bridgestone users. Remember, the next best Bridgestone runner on the grid is in fact Jacques Villeneuve, down in 12th place.
Yes, but I think that's more a function of just where BIR would be and where Ferrari are. But it is something that Ferrari seem to be able to do, and certainly we saw with, I think, maybe more so David Coulthard, who's on that harder tyre, not able to hold the front of the car in, the tyre not giving him the bite constantly around the tight arc of the corner.
So truly working it hard through the chicane, and we'll just see where this puts him. He's not really set a flying lap so far, so now he establishes his time and he goes second fastest, so that's a good effort.
It certainly is, a very good effort indeed, and Jarno Trulli will obviously feel a little bit happier, because when you're quick you're always happy. You're never miserable when you're quick.
Ralf Schumacher qualified reasonably well yesterday, 4th on the grid. In fact, Montoya behind him, 5th on the grid, and no happy smiling eyes inside the helmet today. We normally do see him looking quite cheerful, but he looks rather serious and rather solemn this morning.
He's seen something on one of the TV screens, and
maybe himself,
or maybe just he wanted to get the cobwebs out of his eyes.
He back on the 3rd row today. It's actually his worst qualifying performance since the season opener in Australia, where he was back on the 3rd row. He hasn't been on the 3rd row or lower than that since then, so he's got some work to do here this afternoon. But of course the two Williams teammates were fairly evenly matched in qualifying yesterday, but outpaced this time by the McLaren of Kimi Raikkonen.
Well, surprise, surprise, Ferrari are 1st and 2nd quickest. Jarno Trulli now down to 3rd, some half a second slower than the Brazilian, as Barrichello dives down the hill. Where's the lift? Well, that's the lift we were being told about, and he's just feeling that it isn't possible with a load of fuel on to commit to going absolutely flat out. And as he also said, that you get too much scrub in certain situations, and therefore it's more advantageous just to back out.
Jacques Villeneuve through there, says it's easy flat through there this year, no problems at all. He's very happy from that point of view, but he wasn't so happy yesterday in qualifying. He actually went off, he was passing one of the Saubers, he said, when we suddenly saw him in the gravel. Oh, he's got a bit wide in there, yes, and has to back off a bit mid-corner up at Les Combes. But he did confirm that he managed to stick it into reverse. We had that fairly amazing shot of him backing out of the gravel. That was some fast thinking on behalf of Villeneuve. Finished in the top 8 the last 2 years. He's chucking out there.
I don't know if it was a rip-off or something from his visor, but something on his lap, and he quickly disposed of it through the middle of a Rivage corner. We couldn't see what it was, but I suspect it may have been just a tear off or something on his helmet. Certainly whatever it was not visual to us.
Down the hill. Oh, that back end of the car sliding around a bit there. He had to work quite hard on the second part with Fagnes.
Well, that's typical of, we've seen it so often this year. Jacques Villeneuve ends up with a setup in his car which may be fast for a single lap in a qualifying situation, but he can struggle other occasions, and it looks like this is one of those other occasions. Well, he backed out of the throttle there coming through Blanchimont. That looks like a very imbalanced car to me, and not a comfortable one to drive or try to drive quickly.
Good comparison and difference to watching the Ferrari of Michael Schumacher, isn't it? That's a very clear indicator of the difference in the handling, how much more he's having to work at the steering, and how much less confident he can be with the car.
Well, he was 1.4 seconds slower than his best lap, and he's currently 13th. Pedro de la Rosa comes through the bus stops again. Pedro very quick at one point. He was the back quickest through that first sector. That's now been beaten by Michael Schumacher. This will see him leap up the limit. Well, he goes 4th quickest. I was going to say leap up the times, and he's done that to go 4th.
Montoya crosses the line. He's 6th fastest. So it's now the two Ferraris, the Renault of Trulli, the Jaguar of De La Rosa, and then Raikkonen and Montoya. Panis is currently 7th. The BAR boys, I think, probably have worked harder than anybody so far this year, this weekend rather. They had that engine change for Panis on Friday, which they managed in 42 minutes, which was pretty astonishing. And then, of course, Panis had another engine let go yesterday, and they had to get the spare car ready for him because it had been set up for Jacques Villeneuve. So the BAR guys, I think, have probably had the busiest time so far.
Yes, and doing an engine change in that time is pretty impressive. But of course, teams now are aware that if they do need to make engine changes quickly, that they do have all their parts ready to be just simply take one lot off the back of the car and bolt the next lot on. And it isn't just simply the engine. They usually have a unit of gearbox, suspension, radiators, and that gets plumbed in, and off you go.
Felipe Massa at last is seeing some good top speed figures, and I wonder whether Sauber may have sorted out some of their aerodynamic problems which have been hindering them so far this weekend. Let's take another look at Montoya just a moment ago. What did he get up to at Les Combes?
Oh, actually did a major oversteer and entry, and that's not going to give him too much confidence and not be very committed around other parts of the circuit. In the meantime, Michael Schumacher has improved further to a 1:48.044. With Barrichello a further, well, the best, just under a second behind.
The tyre situation will, of course, be very temperature dependent, and the times that they're doing this morning may be quite different to what they're doing this afternoon, even if it stays dry, because the increase in temperature will make quite a difference to the response of the various Michelin and Bridgestone tyres.
And the best of the Michelin cars, surprise, surprise, Kimi Raikkonen, he's just split the two Ferraris. So Michael Schumacher and Kimi Raikkonen, and that is the front row of the grid position for this afternoon's Grand Prix.
Another improvement from De La Rosa as well, John. He's just done a 49.202, just 2 tenths slower than Raikkonen. And he thinks perhaps the Jaguar runs slightly low on fuel this morning to be setting times quite that rapid.
Yes, of course, Pedro didn't have quite as good a run in qualifying yesterday. And Eddie Irvine, of course, in 8th position. Eddie much further down this morning on a 1:51.5, indicating that he's probably got a fairly high load of fuel on board, whereas Pedro's 49.2 is a much, much lower fuel load.
Fisichella with the job of getting as much data as possible for the Jordan team, having lost Sato from this session early on. It's now all down to the laps that Fisichella completes for them to really establish their race setup. He's done 11 laps so far, most laps completed by Montoya at 12, sharing between his race car and his spare car. And Fisichella, actually, that's his 12th lap now, so those two have done the most laps. Raikkonen following him, just 20 seconds until we see the checkered flag coming out on this morning warm-up.
So Raikkonen and Fisichella get one more lap. They've crossed the line, and they will be able to complete this lap as a timed lap, but anybody within the next 5 seconds will have to then come back into the pits.
Pedro De La Rosa?
Yes, comes through Stavolo. The Jaguar looks pretty good, as you would expect for a car currently third quickest, a personal best in first sector on this lap. Nothing of an improvement, certainly. It's just the time through a 50.0 through the second sector, runs wide coming out of Blanchimont, and that's the end of the bus stop chicane.
Yes, just uses a bit of a curb coming out there. I was just looking at the speed trap figures. Very interesting that both Saubers have suddenly popped up to the top of the speed trap figures up towards Les Combes. Implies that they have made quite a big aerodynamic change. They've gone for a lower downforce, less drag setup, presumably.
Well, they've made a change to the car, and it may be something as straightforward as that, or maybe a lot more complex. As Coulthard drops down through the Pujo double left-hand corner. De La Rosa improved on that last lap. He's in within, well, less than a tenth of a second of Kimi Raikkonen's second fastest time. David Coulthard on the harder of the two Michelin tyres. Correspondingly, his lap time is about, well, just under 4/10 of a second slower than his teammate, which is about where you'd expect it, and really pretty much where it was from the qualifying. But what will be interesting is David, whose race skills are well proven and well accepted, on this harder tyre may well have a better race setup over the 44 laps than his younger teammate.
Yes, and I'm sure that's what he's been working towards this weekend. Neat and tidy through there. No problems at all. Former winner here at Spa. And I'm sure that he will have been working very hard on getting the race setup correct. He's crossed the line, taken checkered flag, third fastest. So we have both McLarens in the top three, but Michael Schumacher a second faster.
To me, what's very interesting is Coulthard's time is about a tenth of a second slower than Raikkonen's time. Now, we don't know how many litres or what weight of fuel they both would have had on board, but what tells me is that Coulthard may have the smarter race tyre setup than the younger Finnish teammate, and the durability of that harder tyre is going to play to, I believe, Coulthard's strength, particularly if the weather stays fine and the temperature builds up, because that will help that slightly harder tyre choice.
Eddie Irvine in deep discussion But generally very happy with the way the car was yesterday. Doesn't look as though he's quite so happy. Was that a braking problem?
Well, I would say he's talking about the brakes, he's talking about a pedal, he's having to pump it up. So he's not at all happy about the feel, or probably about the length of the stroke of the brake pedal. And yeah, it's pretty much a problem that he's been talking about over the weekend. It's one of those anomalies when you've got a brand new front suspension and you're remounting the calipers. Maybe a different feel to the pedal as much as anything else. He's just not comfortable with what is new to him. So trying to get with Brembo, that was the Brembo engineer with the glasses and the jacket, trying to maybe find a little bit of an improvement to give him that little bit extra confidence, because Eddie hits the brake pedal very hard as opposed to maybe Pedro de la Rosa, who's got a different approach to using the brake pedal.
An untroubled session except for the accident for Takuma Sato. Let's check through the times from this morning's warm-up. Michael Schumacher ahead by just under a second from the two McLarens on the different tyre compounds, but only separated themselves by less than a tenth. De La Rosa fourth for Jaguar, then Barrichello and Trulli. Olivier Panis up there reasonably well, seventh after all his problems. His engine lasted well today. Ralf Schumacher eighth, Jacques Villeneuve seeing both BAR Hondas in the top 10, and Sauber maybe having a little more something to feel happy about, because at least Heidfeld's got himself into the top 10, and as I mentioned, the speed trap figures are looking good for the two of them. But Felipe Massa not quite so well up. He's down there in 15th position. Sarlo 12th, Jenson Button down in 13th place, Eddie Irvine only 17th, presumably De La Rosa running a fair bit more fuel than his teammate during that session. Davidson a little faster than his teammate Mark Webber in this morning's warm-up as he prepares for his final Grand Prix for the moment, his second race. And Takuma Sato, of course, not setting a representative time after going off at Stavelot. So that's, as I say, been the situation. A little bit of cloud building up in the background there.
Yes, I mean, compared to what we saw first thing this morning when the clouds, well, there was nowhere, not even on the horizon, so now cloud is beginning to build up as the temperature builds up. The cloud's beginning to drift in, and they've got some 4 hours before this Grand Prix will start. Of course, 30 minutes before the Grand Prix starts, the cars will come out to do their final laps before they take up their place in the grid. And that could prove to be a very busy time. In fact, if the rain does come, and there is expectation that there could be rain at some point during the afternoon. There you see it right now, and that's going to come drifting in, and the entire forest area of this Ardennes forest, just always rain. If there's rain in the distance, it says, over this way, left-handed, now a little bit. We're here, we want some rain. And
yes.
Every time I've gone to Spa, I don't think I've ever been to the circuit, and now there's a broadcaster, there's a racing driver where at some point in the weekend it hasn't been wet.
Very true, yes, it nearly always is raining at some point through the weekend. Well, Fisichella ending up 16th fastest. Still some slightly glum looking faces there. They had hoped for more from Spa, but it hasn't worked so far for them. Have to wait and see. If it's wet, of course, it might come back to them, because the Bridgestone wet tyre, as we know, the intermediate tyre in particular, very, very good. But we'll just have to see exactly. Well, people picking up the TV signal from a variety of sources, and a little interesting discussion, of course. Nigel Mansell with Michael Schumacher, the only two men in Grand Prix history of the World Championship to have taken 9 wins in a season. Mansell did it back in 1992. Schumacher's done it several times, but today Schumacher has the opportunity to beat his own and Mansell's record by taking that 10th win in one season. And what a detailed little discussion going on between the two of them. Well, while they chat, let's take the opportunity to look at the highlights from this morning.